All right, folks, welcome to the MMOA podcast. My name is Dustin Jones, and we have a very special guest on our show today. You may know her as at JJ Mowder PT, Dr. JJ Mowder-Tinney. She is an amazing clinician. She is an amazing educator on multiple levels, whether we're talking academia, whether we're talking continuing education. She's a podcast host as well. You all have probably seen her on MedBridge or on Instagram or on YouTube. She's all over the place giving really, really helpful information, especially if you are very interested in and folks that have neurological conditions. But Dr. JJ is going to come on to bless us with her time and talk through what I perceive to be a challenging journey for many clinicians, and I'll speak for myself with this, is that initial interaction of meeting someone, trying to really assess and identify what they really want to be able to do, their patient-centered goals, and then to craft very pertinent, salient interventions for that individual, and then progress them and regress them, right? Just that journey can be rather challenging, and I can't think of anyone better to help us along that journey than Dr. JJ. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Dustin. Just JJ's good.
Just JJ.
And and I was gonna say, I'm the one who feels honored to be here and that you asked me. I was so excited because you can't say your name without everyone being thrilled and so impressed with everything that you guys have built and all the work that you've done with the aging adult is just very admirable. So appreciate you having me on. I'm very excited to chat with you.
Heck
So
yeah.
what are we gonna talk about?
Yeah. So I think let's just start at the beginning. Like when you are working with a human, right? And I can only imagine just, some of the situation that's at hand, right? Like they've probably had this life-altering diagnosis, maybe a new territory in terms of what they're capable of doing and really learning their limitations. Like it's just such a complex scenario, right? Like talk us through how do you get out of that person, like their goals, their desires, and how do you think about that process? Let's say day one, right? With that initial evaluation.
And that's such a great question. And I think, I'm teaching heavily now. And when I do a lot of consulting and I might see a person for an hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in an hour, I'm trying to identify how can I adjust something? How can I prioritize something? But I think going to your question and when I talk to therapists, because you want the two most important things, and whether it's you're asking the patient and or the family member, like if there are two things that could make your life better at home, what would they be? Or two things that you're worried about. Like I really try to keep it very narrow. And I also just in interactions, I it's kind of funny, but I do two things. I'm looking for complaints. If they complain about something, can we turn it into an intervention? Oh, no one's changed my sheets yet. Okay, well then let's do it. Those types of pieces to where you give them some control. And then I also look for anything that lights up their eyes. That's how I describe it. So if they mention their grandkids or they mention their pets, or if I see something, once I see eyes light up, then I'm like, okay, how could I turn that goal into some type of intervention while also, weighing what I see as their primary limitations. So it's like that marriage of what lights up their eyes and what do I see as the biggest heavy hitters that could make a difference in their function.
Yeah.
Did I get it at all?
Yeah. Yeah. Have you come across many situations where their biggest limitation, their biggest deficit that you observed, right, through your assessment was not necessarily like a big priority for them, or they didn't perceive it to be as big of a limitation as it really was?
Well, I think that's a really good question. And I think that sometimes, depending on the type of stroke, they may not have the insight. So they
Right.
may not see it. So I think that's separate than what you're saying. And sometimes they'll be like, oh, no, I'm fine with that. And the family member's behind them. I like to put the family member behind them to see if they shake their head in the same direction. When I ask a question, like, is this a problem? And they say no. And the family member's like, yes, it is. And so I'm like, okay, let's try to tease this out a little bit. I think my love for this population, one of many, many reasons, is that it's never, ever the same. You
Yeah.
can't approach a person the same. You can't do the same intervention. You can aim for the same themes, intensity, error, like, some of my favorite themes, and try to overlap that, but the approach is going to be different. So I recognize that's not helpful to like, "Oh, I should do this," but I say what's most important is recognizing, ooh, that didn't hit well with them. Like,
Yeah.
or that intervention didn't work. Not, it didn't work because they had a stroke. It didn't work because I need to switch my cue, or I need to switch the environment, or I need to switch my goal. But more of us, I think that therapists, we need to stop being so hard on ourselves to know the answer,
Mm,
but to kind of switch it to being paying more attention to, did I get what I wanted? And if not, don't beat up on us. Don't blame the diagnosis, but switch. Have more ideas to switch to, and
yeah.
kind of wiggle your way in to the outcome that you want.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good point about just the variability in the population and how that keeps you fresh, right? That you're gonna really prevent a lot of mundane, I just think of like so many like post-op scenarios, like in home health, for example, where you're following protocols or just kind of getting into that routine, can really suck the life out of you for sure. So,
Well,
so
and
I
and
like,
you think, and just sorry, Dustin, but just think, before any neurologic injury occurred, their brain was wired different anyway. You see that all the time. All your aging
Mhm.
adults, every person is motivated by something different. They respond differently, they move differently, they have different experiences. And now you layer on a neurological event of
Yeah,
any sort, and I just consider all bets off. So how would it be expected that we would have the answers, I think is
yeah,
shocking. Yeah.
in 1 hour.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or whatever.
right, right. Okay, so we're listening to complaints, right? We're looking for, their eyes to really light up like that moment. We are digging into like what do they what are two things that they want to be able to do that they're really struggling with, at the moment. Just getting into kind of their limitations and what is meaningful to them, right? And that's a lot of information, right, that we're going to be able to weigh and triage and start with. One dynamic that I'd love to get your take on, cuz it's one that I would run into from the home health standpoint, but not all the time. I imagine you probably have interacted more in this dynamic than I have in the context of the home, but that is when like a caregiver is present, right? You're working with that human in front of you, but then there's also this other human that is heavily involved in that person's life, that whatever happens with the patient is going to dramatically impact that caregiver, whether it's a child, whether it's a spouse, whatever, the dynamic is. Do you have any words of advice or wisdom for, folks that have not been in that type of scenario where a caregiver is so present and vocal and a part of the process as, compared to other settings where you don't get that type of dynamic as much?
Yeah. Oh, wow. You are going to start off with the hard ones, aren't you, Dustin?
Yeah, you don't want easy questions.
Don't mess around. Don't mess around. Well, no, I just think I'm trying to think about that, because I feel that I just make sure I take time to acknowledge them. To take time and say, okay, I talk to them both, but I'm gonna say, okay, let me just talk to your wife for a second. And I'll look at the wife. So I'm gonna do this just so they are informed. People want to know, like, an update. Everyone's looking at you thinking, how's that gonna help me? And so it's like,
Mhm.
just, this is what I'm thinking of. Just I want to just spend 1 minute. And so I kind of give them like a chunk. I want to spend 1 minute and hear from you. If I could make your life easier at home, what would it be? Because I want to be here to focus on that. Because I want them to know I'm not just doing random things. If the
Yeah,
patient doesn't know why I'm doing something, and or family member, because I'm saying that because of cognition, not, just if cognitively they aren't sure, or I'm
yeah,
not sure how much they're taking in. But I'm always talking to both of them, but I'm just saying that if I could make, but I tell them I'm going to talk to this person for 1 minute and you can eavesdrop. I always say, and I'll let you eavesdrop. But for you, like, what's the one thing I could do that would make your life easier? And that's the thing I think we need to remember. Those family members are exhausted and they're doing so much. And then what? I leave giving them 3 things they have to do with the person? Yeah, that's
yeah,
not going to happen. And then when they doesn't get done, they feel guilty that they aren't doing everything they can for the person. And that guilt can bury them. And
Mm.
so, the two common heavy hitters, the most common things I hear is like all the bathroom things, getting them to the bathroom in time, taking care of all the things in the bathroom, and getting in and out of the car. Like, and if those two things are critical, in regards to drinking enough water and keeping them moving, as well as getting out of the house and going out and about. But if it's exhausting the family member, like I try to get them to be more specific about exactly what. And I say, okay, so now I cannot thank you enough for that information. That has given me great insight in how I can now approach and what we're going to work on. I said, so
Mm.
I'm going to put you on hold, and now I'm going to hit you hard. So here,
Yeah.
we're ready to go.
Let's do it.
Like, I've got ideas. Now I have ideas. So you're going to have to hold me back. And I just
Yeah.
really try to infuse enthusiasm. Obviously, my go-to is passion, excitement, but I mean it. I'm just excited to try something. And I'll get a lot of gruff faces like, "Brr," like, Sassy Pants has got his pants on, and, he's like, whatever, no one ever does it, whatever.
Right,
And
right.
then I know, okay, I've got to challenge them. I need to count how many reps they've done. I need to put maybe the family member they're starting in again, and I'll be like, hey, I need a favor. I need you to time this for me, or I
Mm.
need you to write down how many reps we do, or I need, like, I feel saying I need you to help me is extremely helpful for the situation.
Yeah.
So let's make it something that they can keep track of. Can you go get a piece of paper and pen? Because I really want you to count how many he does in the 60 seconds. Plus, then I don't have to. Just saying.
Yeah.
I get easily distracted. So,
Yeah.
I'll lose sight of that. And I think that, so asking even the patient, even when I sit down on the floor to look at that ankle range of motion, which is a top priority. And if I have to take the time to take someone's shoe off and their AFO off, which I'll do once because I need to check the AFO. I need to know that ankle. I need to know what's going on with those toes. I need to know their sensation. But when I go to get back up, I hand them my hand and say, help me up.
Yeah.
And it's funny how the family member will reach across to help me. And I'm like, not you. Like,
Yeah.
I want you to help me up. And not with their involved side, with their strong side. But Dustin, I just have to tell you the story because
That's
once I
awesome.
was doing a Parkinson's training up with Faye Horak and Lori King in Portland,
Mhm.
and they brought in a whole bunch of a whole panel of people with Parkinson's, and it was just a great interaction, right? And so we all did our picture at the end, and I sat next to a sweet she was petite lady in a chair, and she had Parkinson's, and her tall, huge husband next to her, and everyone was leaving, and I was chatting with her, but I was sitting on the floor, and so I asked her to help me up because she taught me a really good lesson, and I really appreciated this. And her husband reached down, and I said, not you, you. And it was hard for me to read her face,
Mm.
but she had an interesting look to her face, and she took both her hands and grabbed mine and pulled me up. And then I said, thanks. And I went to leave, and she pulled me down, and she looked at me and she said, you just made my day. And I was like, okay, bye. Like, I was all, it doesn't take much
Get the
to get me all
tissues out there.
scared, right? But it was a real hard hit for me to
Mm.
recognize I've always done that, but it was more of me assessing their trunk and do they have
Mm.
proximal stability and how do they initiate movement to do that? And are they making eye contact with me when they're doing it? I just use it for opportunities to gain information. But for her, I asked her to help me with something. And a lot of our people with neurological deficits, they're just being done to. I know that doesn't
Yes.
make sense, but people are just doing things to them all the
Mhm.
time, and they're never part of it. So whenever I can, family members and them, it's just, to help me with small things, but they know that I'm aiming towards their goals, and they know, like, I'll just ask them, hey, are you going to be upset with me if you're sore in a couple days? If you're sore tomorrow? And that's like just how I set the stage instead of making it like this big brouhaha about, oh, we need to challenge you and we need to do this and this and this and this. I'll just say, hey, are you going to have issues with that? Because I plan on having some fun, and that means you need to work. And we know that's beneficial, period. And they're always like, no, I'm not going to be sore. And so that makes it even more fun because now I
Yeah.
feel like you just do the gauntlet and now I got to go. I got to go at it. So I just had to share that story because that was very touching to me. And I'm very
Yeah.
forever grateful to her because it just made me realize it's the little things. I'll say, take off your own gait belt. Like,
Yeah.
I'm tired.
Yeah, just just like really try and put ourselves in their shoes of for many of these folks, like they were leading lives of, you know, doing things for others, you know, serving others, you know, maybe a particular job. Like they had roles and a part of their identity where they may have not been, um, you know, being waited on, you know, hand and foot, right? And that it's just boom, such a quick transition. And to have that interaction where they've probably been through a lot of the healthcare system already, right? Where everything was being done to them and you give them the opportunity to have some participation, right? To be needed and honestly, when you were telling me that story, what came to mind for me was observing a lot of occupational therapists that I've worked with because I feel the OTs, especially the ones like I've done a ton of co-treats, especially in the home. And that was a consistent theme, especially like transfers, for example, where I would literally try and do the transfer as quickly as possible. You know, it would be like a mod assist, and I'm doing all the work, right? I'm not even putting them in the position for them to use their capacities and their strengths. And then the OT does the same transfer and they're getting so much more out of the patient. They're asking the patient to participate more. And then they would do things like you mentioned to, you know, help them up or take this off. And they wouldn't just do things to them. And I think we could learn a lot from OTs in that regard. I mean, you're obviously, you know, already showing that, but that's a beautiful thing and such an easy it's low hanging fruit, I think, for us to really empower that patient to build that rapport. It's
What
more of us inhibiting our habits and allowing them to participate.
Well, you brought up a couple amazing points, and just shout out OTs because they're near and dear in my heart, and I'm always
Mhm.
jealous that they're just know so much. I mean, there's so many different things that
Yes.
they can approach the person at. But just going back to the transfers, Dustin, I like to joke, but I'm always telling them to enjoy the moment, trying to get
Mm,
them to slow the transfer down because it is always about, let's just get you there. We got to get you there. It's like this, and it's stressful. Just remember a mom with her daughter who had a traumatic brain injury, and she's like, Jay, she's getting heavier and she's more flexed. And it's just like, I don't think I can make it to all these appointments because all these transfers. And so I
mm,
was like, well, watching her, she's not weight shifting. She doesn't have full extension in her hips. So she is getting heavier and more flexed and more stiff. And it is about this whole getting twisted up in her legs because they're focused on there. I got to get there. And it's this, and you can see the stress on everybody. And if she's stressed, her daughter's stressed.
yeah.
So I was like, well, let's work on standing. I got her hand on her hip. I got her to lift her other arm up. That was pretty good to get the extension. So you're looking at, okay, how can I adjust the environment to get the position I need? Then I was like, okay, what kind of music do we listen to? And of course, it was Taylor Swift.
Oh,
And so I had to find the right speed to work on the weight shifting. And the daughter would start singing the best she could, Taylor Swift song. And we started shifting. And then I just started moving them. I started moving them with every shift. And I said, all right, mom, so she's like, that was so easy. And I said, well, so now every time you stand up, you guys are going to start singing this song together. And you're going to look at this as something to look forward to. This
Mm.
transfer together is your time. And I go, but you got to learn the song. I said, mom, you're going to have to learn the Taylor Swift song. She's like, I know them all. So I was like, okay. Noted. But you're going to have to just embrace the whole song. But doing that piece of adjusting, of slowing down. And the other thing that you brought up, Dustin, was, and I am very guilty of this for maybe many years, is not giving my patient enough time to respond.
Mm.
Processing is hard. Initiating movement is hard. And I'm like saying, okay, we're going to transfer now and whooshing, max assist. There I go. Look at me. And if I would have just slowed my roll down just a little bit and let them tell them, okay, we're going to sit here and just wait it a little bit and let them start figuring it out. I can get more part of the brain involved, right? And I can
Yeah.
assess better, where is my biggest problem? Because that's what I'm always asking. Why do they need that much assist for this? Like,
Yeah.
why? So that then, but some of it is processing. And until I give them that time, but let me tell you, my OT friend Ange, she always tells me, you got to wait 60 seconds. And I'm like, Hard
That's
pass. I
painful.
give you 6. I'm working on 7 though. That's my joke. Is I'm working on 7 seconds, but I can't wait longer than that. But I found that just the 6 seconds makes such a big difference, and we're always in a hurry, and the therapists are working so hard out there, and they have so much pressure on them to see more people, and all these things are going on, and it's distracting for them.
Mhm.
And I got to get this done, and I'm supposed to get this done and this done and this done. And, just shout out to them because they're just working so hard and they're so important to this population. But, if we could
Yeah.
just slow it down just a little bit.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, the 60 seconds that's
No way.
painful. 7 is yeah.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
I love it. All right, so we've got some really helpful information from the patient, from the caregiver as well, and just all that, you're triaging, you are, prioritizing, right? Like what we really want to work on, and we got a list, right? Let's say like the caregiver, is really concerned, or they really like that car transfer to be a lot easier, or a particular, transfer in the home, and the patient, wants to be able to, get out to their weekly bridge game, or whatever it is, right?
Right.
So how, when you go to start some of these interventions, like what's going through your mind? What are you really prioritizing when you're thinking about this person? Are you concerned about intensity and like for it being hard enough? Are you trying to make it really easy so they do well? Like what are you really prioritizing when you first introduce an intervention based on that subjective information that you got?
Well, I'd say in the past, I obviously went too easy. I think now I try to challenge them more, but I set the stage that I want to make this hard because we need to, there's parts of your brain that we need to help us, but they're on vacation if it's too easy. So that's kind of like the rationale I get,
I like
trying to
that.
get the cerebellum involved. So, to do that, like I'm going to let you plop, or if I let you plop, I'm like, "Oh, good." And they're like, "I plopped." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm glad." Because that's the only way I can get that part of the brain that's on vacation to come join and help us out.
Mm,
So I am going to allow you to do that. So, whether or not I explain it extensively or just a little bit, um, but, I try to allow error. Um, I know how important intensity is. Consistently in the literature, we know to get their heart rate up. So, but I first try to figure out, okay, what are some priority movements that I need? And then I tend to go with circuits and interval training, depending
mhm.
on what I think would fit. So, but I'm always aiming for heavy hitters while I don't know. It's so hard. I was like thinking, wow, I'm always wondering why can't they do this? What I think we lose sight on if we just go high intensity is that there are key muscles we have to have, like glute
Mhm.
max, like glute med, so people don't fall over in turning. Like, I want to know why they need the device so I can sprinkle in some really 10 reps of something really challenging at a muscle that only takes 1 minute. It only takes 1 minute for me to like address this if
Mm,
I challenge them enough to then go to let's get some more walking, or let's do some backward walking, or let's just get on that step and go back and forth. But if you can't do that and you feel overwhelmed, like I want to go with more, no matter what, it needs to be functional. I get that. 90% of the session to me needs to be task specific, exactly the task you want them to do. But the other 10% is going to be those little things that are why they can't do the task,
yeah.
but intensive enough that it doesn't take very long. I'm not going to lay
Mhm.
down someone and do 10 minutes of an isolated muscle strengthening. We already know that's like bad use of time. We need to be more strategic.
Yeah.
Because from a therapist perspective, what do I hear the most? We don't have enough time with our patients. Okay, well, I can't control insurance companies. I mean, people are working on that, but not me personally. I can only control what's in my session. I have 40 minutes. Like, how can I control that? Well, let's do standing rests instead of sitting rests, because then I have to listen about grandkids' birthday parties and stuff and get water. Where if they stand and I can get them to stretch and I can get them to breathe and I can look at some visual tracking while we're standing there, they don't last long after 30 seconds. They're like, let's do it again. Like, can I be more strategic? Can I go high intensity, even if it's just in one place for 1 minute and then go try to retrain the actual movement, because we know from the research that sets the brain up
Yeah.
to be more successful. Yeah, would I want 60 minutes of that? Yeah, but realistically, let's just try a little bit more and a little bit
Mhm.
more and a little bit more. And I think so. I'm kind of testing the waters. If you were to first see if I was back in rehab, if I was back in rehab, my first session is I got to figure out the why and what are the 2 or 3 most important things. If I could wave a magic wand and say, I need this and this muscle stronger. Generally it's if they've got quads for neuro, once they have those, I need glutes. I mean, I need glute max, I need glute med. And so or proximal stability, but how can I layer that in to, okay, then let's resist sit to stand. But Jay, usually I get, but there are men mod assist sit to stand. I can't resist them. I was like, watch me. So my big thing now is you resist them and assist them, because we have to get more sensory input. We need to force more motor unit recruitment. We need to force error so that we can wake up the cerebellum. I need all hands on deck. I need all the help I can get. And sensory is a huge one. So if they can't, they're mod assist to get up, and I add resistance and then let them go a little bit and then
Mhm.
plop just a little bit harder and then say, okay, you got this now. If I can show them after, then now push, 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 hold, 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 hold. I have to do a little bit more work, but I'm adding the resistance. We're getting overflow to get motor unit recruitment, waking up cerebellum, allowing some error, do a few of those, and then take away the band, and they see improvement. I got them. I've got them.
Yep.
They will do whatever I want, even when I'm on a crazy day and it was a big bad bust. I
Yeah.
mean, I try stuff and I call it the triple B. If I try something and it was a big bad bust, like I tell them, they're like, I think in the past, Dustin, I was always afraid that if they failed at something I tried with them, then I'd lost them. And I
Mhm.
think looking back, that was a mistake. As long as I'm
Yep.
honest with them, I got an idea. Like, will you help me try it? Like, I learned this thing at this course. Will you help me? And then if it doesn't go right and you're frustrated, that means they're frustrated. So I'll ditch it. I'll be like, oh, thank you so much, because that gave me great insight. Now I know where we need to go.
Yeah.
But the majority of the time, if I had to make up a number, I would say 80% of the time, I try something that I think is going to be too hard for them, and they do it. And I'm like, son of a gun.
Yeah.
Like, that was supposed to be harder, and now I got to
Yes.
think of something new. Like, oh, no, man.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think especially the intensity conversation is really interesting when you are working to achieve high intensity out in the wild, right? Like, it's very easy to read a research paper, see an Instagram clip or whatever, and be like, okay, this is what I need to be doing with my folks. And the reality is that w- no one, hardly anyone ever really starts there, right? Like, you're figuring out their capacity. You're making sure you're getting some successful reps, making sure you're building rapport. You are challenging that person, right? But I've worked with many folks where, right out the gate, you are getting that, true high intensity session, right? There's usually some kind of period of time, and it may be in session, right? Or multiple sessions where you may be going maybe a little bit easier, or you're just getting an idea of what their capacity is from the physical standpoint, but then also from the mental standpoint and what they're able to handle. If there's a lot of fear on board, for example, or pain, so on and so forth. And so I like to view that achieving higher intensities is almost, I wouldn't say like the destination, because that implies like that once you've arrived, you stay
Yeah.
there, right? But it's
Mm.
like this journey that you get to versus where you start from immediately. With that journey, if you will, you mentioned error several times, and I think this is a really fascinating conversation about strategically using error in rehabilitation. What is too much? What is too little? What's your take on that, and kind of how do you think about the use of error in rehabilitation?
Yeah. And so that's a great question. I think that's what we're all searching for.
Yeah.
Right. And so, um, when you're incorporating error, that is about allowing the patient to error. And so let's give an example. Just allow them to plop. Right. So we're like, oh no, they're not supposed to plop. Don't
Mhm.
plop. But it's like, why not? Like, unless I let them. Now, this is a little different than my background way back when I was NDT trained, of just they need to feel perfect every time. Now, we know at times errorless learning is better, but I've just been so excited about the outcomes of allowing the error, because what does the cerebellum do? It helps us adjust movement. And so if there is no error and I make it look perfect with my hands, which sometimes I need if they have no activation. If I don't have any activation, I have to start where they are. And that means I have to just get them there, right? So we still need to use our handling techniques. We still need to understand biomechanics and handling techniques. But once they're able to do some type of movement, even if they're a heavier assist, like let them lean over as far as you feel is safe. So the response I usually get is, well, the chair will come out from underneath them. Well, don't let that happen. They'll fall over. Well, don't let that happen. Like, let them go, just start a little ways. I think this communication of just trying to just be aware of what we're doing, self-assess. Why did I stop them so soon? I was afraid they're going to fall
Mhm.
over. Well, then let them go just a little further and see, or put them in the chair and see what happens. But I think that we don't know. So, I joke, like, sometimes I put the weight on this leg and sometimes I put it on that one. And if you don't remember which one, just pick one. Big deal. What if afterwards they go, that felt worse? And you're like, you are right. That was. And so we're going to put it on the other leg this time.
Yeah.
I mean, we know it takes a whole lot more than that to change the brain, to
Mhm.
facilitate neuroplasticity. I need lots and lots and lots of repetitions. So we just need to lay off of ourselves of, okay, I tried it and the after effect was worse. Okay, don't do that again then. Let's not do that one. So now I know, okay, that's not the way this, it works here, or it's too soon and I need to go back. And so if I'm going to go back to errorless, let's do it with lots of repetitions. Let's increase the speed so they get more repetitions in. Let's add some a weighted vest so they get more sensory input. Let's have them
Mhm.
do it with their eyes closed so they can actually feel the movement. Let's adjust the environment in a different way, because that little allowing them to error thing didn't work in this case.
Mhm.
Because we just don't know yet. And as soon as we do, I mean, the inclusion and exclusion criteria for a lot of the great research, don't get me wrong, I'm very, very grateful because they give us these themes that we want to work towards. But
Mhm.
then, like, oh, high intensity is really important, but 20% of the patients actually, they have autonomic issues. And so I need to teach them how to breathe and how to control and how to give them some more sensory input and try to bring them down. But there's one consistent theme here, Dustin, I just want to emphasize, and that's we need to continue to be, or to assess ourselves. Are we assessing our patient? Like, are we
Mhm.
using rate of perceived exertion? Are we using some type of heart rate monitor, the O2 sat machine? I mean, just a little O2 sat. I'll take what I can get. Teach them how to use their own watch and so they can carry over at home. Because this is more than just what we're doing in the clinic. We want to carry over it to home.
Yeah.
And they need help with doing that. And we need a way to communicate with them and help them figure out their body. So RPE, our observation. So, walking someone who like is used to sitting, I was just thinking of someone with COPD. He's just so used to
Yeah.
sitting and he needed rest. I'm like, okay, let's try standing. He's like, what? Wife didn't like it, but he was like, okay. And then he was like, okay, well, I'm ready. I'll walk again. And he was walking again and I was in a different state. So it was someone else's patient.
Mhm.
And so I was like, we better sit because I'm getting nervous. And he goes, I said, okay, do you want to sit now? And he's like, I can stand and rest, don't you? And it hit me hard because I was thinking, oh my gosh, like he just didn't know. And then the next stop, I looked at him, he goes, I need to sit this time. And when he sat, I looked at him, I said, so what was different? Why did this time you needed to sit? And the last time you were okay with standing again? Because that's the sweet spot. That's what we're looking for. So and your wife will calm down because she was making me anxious. She's like, he doesn't walk this far. I was like, okay, let's just take a breath. But I think, you know, that of just incorporating more of the monitoring and, because that also gives us insight to where a lot of times once I started measuring heart rate more, I was like, oh, Nelly, like I thought this was a lot harder because they're sweating bullets doing supine to sit back and forth both directions. But I didn't quite get their heart rate up because we know we
Mhm.
need those big muscle pumps. And so can I just interweave it
Yeah.
the best of my ability and see, oh, this one responds really well. When I add this, their heart rate goes up. But for the other little group of people, oh, this works really well to calm them down or to try to kind of smooth out their autonomic system. I don't
Yeah.
think I answered your question, but that's where I went.
No, you did. You did. The monitoring piece, I think it is also, I find that very fun in the sense of what, like with certain people, you're going to probably emphasize certain objective data points, right? Like if I'm working with someone with COPD, that, that pulse ox is going to be pretty close, right? And you're probably going to look at oxygen saturation a good bit. Like that's going to be a variable that they care about, that they understand, and we can dose based on that. And then there's other individuals where it may be blood pressure, like their response to blood pressure and ensuring safety from that regard. And some it may be heart rate, right, where we're making sure that we're getting, into that appropriate range. And I find that to be enjoyable as a clinician because it's like a problem you're trying to solve. Like, what is the most pertinent variable that I do want to emphasize here to ensure, intensity? And it's not always the same, with everyone. I think that's a lot of folks can kind of overwhelm themselves by tracking all the things. Like, all right, during this, rest period, during this interval, I'm going to get your heart rate, I'm going to get your blood pressure, I'm going to get your oxygen saturation and your RP to ensure that we're at appropriate intensity. And that's tough. That's really, really tough to do.
Well, there's two things I love. One is you said you enjoy it. And so I think that's what, you enjoy solving the problem, like solving which one affects them the most. And
Mhm.
and you can't do all of it at once a lot of times, but you need a pre to have a post. And so, understanding baselines if you're in the hospital, like get those baselines from the nurse's notes or something. Send your student to go do it. Go data mine all this, get blood pressures and whatever, so we have some baselines. So if we do the 6-minute walk test and I take a blood pressure, if I didn't do it I mean, I don't know if that if that was they're just always that high. I mean, I don't
Mhm.
know. So, at least, but I think I really liked how you said try to enjoy it more. Recognize you will have people like certain patients with stroke who aren't breathing through their chest. I'm always amazed at how their sats are dropping, but they show no other symptoms. And if I wouldn't have been
Mhm.
testing with that O2 sat monitor, I'm like, you're DSAT. You're like a little sneaky DSATter, And so you're 87, 86, and you are like, no, I'm fine. And
Yeah.
you do a couple deep breaths and they're great. And so now I know, okay, this is gonna be, and then that's a problem that you just solved. And
Yeah.
so you're right. I really like how you brought that up. And if we would try and look at it like that and just do the best you can and try to find ways to make it easier. Like once they understand the RPE and that can be a way that you communicate, then,
Mhm.
then it's not going to take that long to do that one. Is that always consistent? No. Do our patients are on beta blockers? Yes. So then do I need to count on these other things? Absolutely. So like you said, it's not a cookbook,
Mhm.
but we do need more data points.
Yeah.
And then we look for trends, right? And then when if something's going sideways, then it's a little easier to identify that.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. So we we have that helpful information from the subjective, right? Their complaints, what they want to be able to do, right? If they didn't have any limitations, what's the caregiver input? We create this intervention. We are allowing error. We're monitoring, like we're really dialing in that intensity. And where I want to land the plane, if you will, is I think a hurdle or a question that I get a lot, and I'd love your take on is let's say you are working with that individual and you've got your list, right? 3 very functional, task specific, activities that are relevant to that person and their goals.
Mhm.
What do you think about when structuring your session? And to zoom in a little bit more, what activities, like what are you thinking about when you're like, okay, we just need to work on this task, like block practice, if you will, versus I'm going to put this in the context of a workout, right? Where it may be like a station or part of a circuit where, we're getting kind of a different benefit. Like, how do you think about structuring your sessions? What should be done kind of alone where you're just focusing on that and not a part of, a workout per se or an EMOM or some type of circuit versus like what's okay to throw into a circuit or some type of structure where you're doing working through multiple activities. The structure of a session, I feel like, can be a challenge for a lot of folks once they get
Yeah.
to this point. So I'd love your take, anything that you think through when structuring.
Well, I think that I'm really bad, Dustin, about following the rules of what words mean. So, for instance, like because like I think when you come, like you're saying, okay, a circuit and all of it has to be high intensity, and I'm looking at it as both intensity and repetition, and so maybe I need to make up my own words, which I tend to do anyway. But so if I saw that there's a component that they can't do, I'm going to break the whole task into a part, but I still might structure that within the 3 minutes. So for each station, so this
Okay.
station, I'm doing 3 minutes of this part of hip extension activation, getting this component, and we're doing it repeatedly, or I'm adding some resistance with the arm at the same time, but I'm breaking down this task that's harder. Or sit to stand from a low soft couch. That one's going to be, I'm going to wait and do that one until after I've done hold squats. Or, how long can they hold it for? 30 seconds of this 3 minutes, and then they come up and then they come back down. And how long can you hold it for? Or how many can you do in that part range? So I'm
Mm.
taking full tasks, and we know the whole task is better. Okay. I understand that. But if they're having a problem with the movement and I can part it, but I can get a lot of repetitions with that or add more resistance to give more input, I will still put it in this context of, okay, this circuit, it's more of a mindset for them. It just is helping me get more repetitions when the timer's going.
Mm.
And then after I get that prepped and I do that one in that station, then we're going to go for how far can we walk? And then we'll write down, you went 20 feet further. Like this which is common for a lot of populations, but I say like a person who's had a stroke doesn't feel like they've improved unless they are like they were before the stroke.
Mm.
So I
Yeah.
need small wins. I need dopamine hits. And so stations allow us to do that, and once you figure out like a couple of your favorites, then I can have them bark. How long were you able to hold that squat before you had to change? I don't have to measure everything,
Right.
but I want to measure some key things. If toileting is a problem and they need to be able to hold a squat so they can take care of business, then I want to time that. And I want to put that time up because that's something that has been really bothering them that their family member has to help them with. And then the next station, they just held that squat for a long time. We got that. Then I might walk it out in station 2, but station 3, now I have a TheraBand around their waist that I'm having them pull up and pull down in a semi squat. So that I'm working on some of their balance while
Mm.
I'm trying to. So it's not. So when I say circuit, so this is what I mean when I say, you know, from a definition standpoint, I think I make up my own stuff because I'm just looking at a structure of trying to get. So now I have 10 minutes left of a session. Can I have 3 stations that are 3 minutes each that are the part whole or a buildup
Mm.
of the most important task? So is that a high intensity circuit? No. Is it a timed stations? Yes. So I tend to call that a circuit. So I've kind of made my own wiggle in there.
I'm
Um,
tracking.
does that make
And
sense?
I would argue that is
Very self-conscious because I get in trouble a lot because it's like, oh no, that's not this is this. And I'm like, oh, I know, but I just have to keep jimmying it. And in the end, I want to try to get things as intensive as possible. In the end, I need lots of repetitions. I have to stick to task specific, but I
Mhm.
don't want to lose sight of the why. And in the end, I want to carry over to home. And what are the what's going to improve their quality of life? And so I want to make their lives easier and better so they
Yeah.
can enjoy home more. And I can't do everything because that's just going to burn you out. I need to focus in on if they could pick 2 things. In my opinion, that's kind of where I've ended up landing, where I've seen the best success. So,
And I appreciate you sharing that, especially just like thinking about the circuits and the task of what I appreciate is the the thought to break a functional task down into parts, because I think like when I was going through PT school, for example, a lot of our exercise prescription, a lot of the education, and my exposure on clinical rotations was a lot of part-based practice that never brought things really together. It was a lot of isolated movements that we would challenge, really in the hopes that they would all work together to, improve performance and independence in this kind of big global functional task. And then it's like things really shift to the other side of the spectrum where stop wasting time on all those isolated movements and those part tasks and just get big global movements, functional movements, add some weight, reduce rest, make it high intensity, get them sweating. And what I'm hearing from you is both are great. It's an and not or. Let's kind of come back to the middle. And yes, we do need to do global functional movements, but if there is a part of that task, a specific deficit that is resulting in impaired performance or independence in this global task, we need to work on that. It's not just going to get better if you just do more and more reps of this global task. And that's a breath of fresh air to me, because I've definitely been more on this side, and for a lot of my career of let's get that heart rate up. Let's do those global tasks. And I've really gotten away from those part tasks that was so prevalent, especially early on my career and in my training. So I appreciate that. And I hope clinicians will get that, right? It's an and not or. Break it down. Like, don't completely ignore those very specific deficits, because some of those isolated movements, techniques, some of the things that we're talking about where you're zooming in a little bit more are going to be very helpful to work on. Not all of them, right? But there can be a limiting factor, and we don't want to ignore that.
And I would say I want it all.
Yes.
And I love the way you said zoom in on it. And I want to be clear that when you do zoom in and you do that repeatedly, you don't have to do it for very long. Like you're doing it for a minute, maybe 3 if it's part of the station, whatever. When I actually zoom in on glute med and actually get motor unit recruitment, like I don't have to, we're talking 1 session, 2 sessions. But I'd also say, yes, if someone comes at me, which happens, well, there's no evidence for that. It's like, you're right, because we can't research each of our patient presentations and vary it. A lot of these studies are comparing some very basic standing and weight shifting for 10 minutes and then, riding a bike with no intensity measured for 10 minutes along with stretching for 10 minutes. No, that's not what I'm talking about at all. But when you see the why, and then you can start getting those glutes activated, it doesn't take much when we hone in better, but we continue to need to work on our eyes, I think. And why are they moving that way? You see, y'all are great at that. Let's put some deadlifts in there in standing and or sitting and get those glutes activated as a station and do it. But let's take your thought and do the high intensity part first. Be strategic. Do the higher intensity part first sometimes. If there's an activity that they could do, even if it's just with their stronger side, to raise the heart rate, get the neurotrophins set, then go and isolate some of the training where then their heart rate might come down. So maybe you do intervals, but you can isolate that part task, then rev them again, then go try to do a retraining of a movement. That's kind of like your thing about being fun with the monitoring of the vitals.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
ooh, what's the combination that works for this person? Let's do that combination. What's the combination of this? And given the evidence, going intensive bursts and get some dopamine released and get some of these pieces, but then go all in and get this piece with some strengthening quick, not 10 minutes. We're just talking a little focused thing, and then go zoom in. I like your zoom in. I'm going to take that. I'm taking that, Dustin.
I'm taking a lot from this podcast from you, JJ, and the dopamine hits that you mentioned several times. I've had a lot of dopamine hits throughout this podcast. So I appreciate you just sharing your perspective. Obviously, I know it comes through for listeners and viewers, whether you're watching, or listening, that just your passion, your knowledge, your experience, practicality as well, right? Like, I think that's one of your superpowers, is how practical you can make things. This was gold. This is absolute gold. And so for folks that are not following JJ, you need to do that. There's so many things that JJ described throughout this podcast that she has videos for, very quick, very practical, videos that you will get tons and tons of treatment ideas based on some of the principles that we've talked about. I want to make sure they know about your Instagram. So at JJ Mowder PT, and then your website, jjmowderpt.com.
I'm not very creative.
Hey, but They're gonna remember, right? jjmowderpt.com. You will find all the things that JJ's involved in, the MedBridge course, all the different continuing education courses that she teaches, her podcast as well with that MedBridge network, all the things, right? So, JJ, thank you for your expertise, your time. This is a really helpful conversation for me. I know it was for, those that are listening as well. Do you have anything else to add before we part ways, or anything else that you want folks to go to or pay attention to?
No, I would just say, therapists, just be nicer to yourselves. And my Instagram isn't for clinical reasoning. It was for you're feeling you're hard on yourselves and you want a new idea for a certain patient, scroll through and then just try it and then make it better. But we need to support each other and keep trying things and try to challenge our patients. But I think we need the support of everyone. These are it's a very challenging population, and we're all just trying to get better and get them home. So be nice to yourselves. And Dustin, can't thank you enough. It's just such a pleasure to chat with you. So thank you for having me on.